Welcome back to another episode of Warren Cali. In this episode, I'm going to detail the story of rapper Flipside from the group OFTB. Flipside grew up in Watts in the Nickerson Garden housing projects, which is known for the gang, the Bounty Hunter Bloods. He was heavily involved in the streets and grew up in a war zone in Watts. Flipside's lifestyle led to him going in and out of jail during his teenage years. While in jail, he started to rap with a lot of time on his hands, which he started to take serious, and once he was released, he would link up with several friends, and they would start working on their raps together. They would eventually form a group, which they would call OFTB, which meant Operation from the Bottom. The group consisted of Flipside, Bus Stop, and Low MB. The group and its members were heavily affiliated with the Bounty Hunter Bloods, and they would show it often in their videos. OFTB would start to gain a local buzz in Watts and in surrounding areas. They started to go to other cities and states to get more notice. OFTB would end up signing with Big Beat Records, which they released their debut album called Straight Outta Watts on in 1992, with their leading single being called Slangin' Dope. With their buzz getting big around LA, Suge Knight decided to sign the group OFTB to Death Row Records, which was one of the biggest labels around at the time. OFTB appeared on the platinum-selling soundtrack for the '94 film Above the Rim. They appeared with a song called Crack 'Em. They also rapped on the '94 film Murder Was the Case soundtrack. OFTB would even have a good relationship with Tupac and even appeared in some songs with him. They also appeared on several soundtracks to movies he was in, like the Gridlock soundtrack and also the movie gang-related soundtrack. But OFTB never got to blow up the way that many expected. The downfall of Death Row would happen in the middle of their careers. Tupac was killed, Dr. Dre left the label, and Suge Knight went to prison. This left Death Row and a lot of his artists in chaos, and OFTB will be one of the artists on the label to fall victim. After several issues with Death Row going on, this left OFTB's career in a bad state, and after several years, the group will step away from music for a while. Flipside will focus on being a father and working on other ventures like trying to develop younger artists from his hood, and he was involved early with rappers like J-Rock. After several years, the group OFTB will come back together and start releasing music again. They dropped an album in 2007, which they called Unearth. 2009, they released the Missing DR Files. In 2011, they released an album called Down Near Dead. In 2013, they released an album called Hostile Environment. Flipside continued to stay active with helping young artists and working on his own music. But by 2013, things would go tragic for Flipside. Kevin, Marvin, and Chris were all Grape Street Crips. They lived in the Jordan housing projects. For decades, the Grape Street Crips had been locked in a deadly war against the Bounty Hunter Bloods and the PJ Watts Crips, even though it had been previous ceasefires and peace movements in the past. By 2013, the war Grape Street had with both gangs would be in full-fledged. On August 4th, 2013, Marvin was shot in his arm as he was arriving at his home in the Jordan Downs. When Marvin was questioned by the police, Marvin was uncooperative and declined to offer the information regarding the identity of the shooter. 1 month later, about 2:30 p.m. on September 23rd, 2013, Marvin was sitting outside his girlfriend's apartment in the Jordan housing projects. A car would drive up, and one or more occupants of the car fired several gunshots at Marvin. He suffered a graze wound to the head. Marvin went to the hospital for treatment. When police arrived at the hospital to speak with Marvin about the incident, he ripped off his monitoring equipment and went home. He would later tell a neighbor, "I'm going to get those dudes." On September 23rd, 2013, about 7:25 p.m., Flipside was in the front yard of his home in the Nickerson Garden projects when the Chevy Tahoe pulled up to the curb and Flipside approached the Tahoe. He then turned around and ran back into his yard. Two men got out of the Tahoe and repeatedly shot Flipside until he died. Flipside never witnessed the whole shooting. She was shot in the leg after she called out Flipside's name. Several other witnesses also saw the shooting. Markice, also known as Chicken, was a member of the PJ Watts Crips. On the evening of September 23rd, Markice was visiting his girlfriend in an apartment in Imperial Courts about 7:35 p.m., just 10 minutes after Flipside was killed. Markice walked out his girlfriend's apartment and several gunshots rang out. Markice's girlfriend looked outside her window and saw three men getting into a van, and she heard the man yell, "This is Grape Street." She ran outside and found Markice had been shot 6 times and had a fatal gunshot wound to his head. The Jordan Down projects, the Nickerson Garden projects, and the Imperial Courts all have police monitor video surveillance and license plate recognition cameras. Police had recordings from the cameras on the day of the shootings. About 4:40 p.m. on September 23rd, cameras at Jordan Downs recorded images of a van pulling into the parking lot, followed shortly thereafter by another car. Chris is seen exiting the other car and walking to occupants of a van, which included Kevin and an unidentified individual. Between 7:14 p.m. and 7:16 p.m., the van that had Grape Street members inside was traveling together in the Nickerson Garden projects. The minivan no longer had a license plate, and only one of its taillights was operating. The camera lost sight of the vehicle around 7:25 p.m. Shortly thereafter, the vehicle could be seen driving at a high rate of speed, leaving the Nickerson Gardens. At 7:35, a van and a following car were seen together in the Imperial Courts. The van stopped in front of Markice, and one of the men in the van got out with a gun in his left hand and shot Markice. Two other men got out of the van and also fired at Markice as he was laying on the ground. All three men got in the van and drove off. About 6:54 p.m., the day of the shooting, Marvin's cell phone sent out a text to Kevin stating, "Come out." Marvin and Chris' cell phones also utilized cell phone towers in the vicinity of Markice's murder around the time he was shot. A photo found on Marvin's phone resembled one of the guns found in the van. Marvin's fingerprints were also found on the window of the van's rear passenger sliding door. In May of 2015, while executing a search warrant at the Grape Street Crips hangouts, police found a gun used in the shootings of Flipside and Markice. Kevin, Chris, and Marvin were all picked up for the murders. With all the evidence pointing against them from cell phone towers, video surveillance, and fingerprints, this led to all three men receiving a life sentence. A funeral for Flipside was held in Watts with over 700 people in attendance from fellow rappers, people in his community, and supporters of Flipside. He was 44 years old. This will conclude this episode. If you haven't already, check out my previous episodes. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.